Welcome to On the Couch Conversations with the Warehouse. We are a non-profit organization based in Cape Town, South Africa, passionate about societal transformation through an engaged and justice-centered church. We believe that Jesus is never disengaged from pain, oppression, or injustice, and as such, neither should we be. Join us on a journey to explore what it means to emulate his ways of being within our context today.
Welcome and good evening to everyone who is here. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Thandi Gamedze. I work for the Warehouse, and the Warehouse is an organization that works to see churches living out the peace and justice of God in their different contexts, and all of the various ways that that expresses itself theologically and also practically in their communities. So this evening is part of our On the Couch series, and we've been doing this for a while, and really each time we highlight a different issue that we feel is important at the time, or is being highlighted at the time, something that is relating to the work that we're doing. And so welcome to this On the Couch event, which is called For the Sake of Our Children. And that quote comes out of a Lamentations passage. And really in this work of seeking the peace and justice of God, we know that children who are often vulnerable and marginalized in different ways, part of society, children often end up bearing the brunt of the different kinds of injustices that we see in our world. So this evening, we really want to highlight that and recognize some of the work that is going on in this area, and some of the work that churches can maybe get involved in this. So we're really looking forward to the conversation this evening. We have a really incredible panel. So Caroline Powell, who is from the Warehouse, is going to be hosting a conversation with three incredible women who do amazing work in this area. So we have Danielle or Dani Moosajie, who is the CEO of Arise Children's Ministries. We have Lilian Zweni, who was previously part of the Warehouse before my time. So unfortunately, our paths never crossed there, but I've heard many amazing things about her. And she is a social worker in social development, and she's also a church leader. And then we also have Minah, Koela, who is the CEO of Beautiful Gate. So three incredible women doing different kinds of work and advocacy around children in society. So we're so excited to have you here today. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining this conversation. And then also we have a really special part of this evening is going to be the handing over of a Warehouse resource called Children, Church and the Law, and we are handing that resource over to Arise, to Dani and the team, and we're really excited to do that. So that will happen after the conversation at the end of today, and we're looking really forward to what God is going to do through that. So please welcome. You are so welcome here. Feel free to write comments and questions in the chat as the panelists have the conversation, and we hope there'll be some time at the end where we can answer those questions and respond to some of the things in the chat. So do feel free to participate in that way. And then without further ado, I will hand over to Caroline, who will be hosting the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I am so excited to have this conversation with all of you for so many reasons, because each one of you in your spaces have inspired me in different ways with the work that you do, and also because you are people and women of faith in our city who hold out hope in front of us in very tangible ways. And when we have these conversations at the warehouse, we're always trying to help our community, the wider community of people from churches across our city and our country, and even the world who might watch this recording at a later stage, grapple with our lived faith in the world. And so we believe that we live out our faith in action, and our action continues to inform our faith and our theology and our reflections, and then those reflections help inform how we act and live in the world, fueled by that faith and that belief. And so I want to invite each one of you to introduce yourself, because I think that also central to everything that we do and believe is this idea of our context and our story. And we know that you all have just beautiful stories as to how you got to do this work. I'm going to start by inviting all three of you to do that. And then after that, we're going to try and capitalize on the time that we have before 8 o'clock, because one of our panelists, Lilian, might have load shedding. So we're going to then give the floor over to her to do quite a bit of the sharing. So Lilian, you'll be in the hot seat. You have the advantage of giving all your wisdom up front, and then maybe it won't happen, and then you'll be with us for the rest of the evening. But we'll start off by hearing from each of you individually. A chance to introduce yourself by sharing just a short bit about the journey of how you came to do the work that you do now. And as part of this, we would also love to hear a little bit about that work. If you come from an organization, you do come from organizations that we would love to also center the work that you do, so that our audience can learn more about and support what you do and network and get involved. So we'll start with Minah. You didn't expect that. Minah, tell us your story and the story of what you do.
Okay, yeah. So as you guys have heard, I'm Minah Koela, and I am from beautiful Gate, South Africa. So I think the question is, how did I end up at Beautiful Gate? It's a good question. So I immigrated from the United States of Kailicha to the United Kingdom of Muizenberg, looking for Hollywood, because the person who told me about YWAM said I was going overseas. So I was excited. So I ended up in Muizenberg, not looking for Jesus. I was looking to be an actress. So somehow I am speaking on the TV, which is, we're thankful to Zoom, because here we are. So I went to YWAM, and I think by God's grace, God found me there. And then I came to faith in Jesus, as mental as I was at the time. And at that time, so I went on outreach, and then I came back to did a different school. And one of the things, because I was a single mom of 2 boys, one of the only ways maybe I could do like some outreaches was to do something in the evening when the boys were sleeping. So one of the ministries that caught my heart, of course, I'm coming from the United States of Kailicha. You don't really see kids on the street. So I was excited when Toby and Akia were talking about a Wednesday nights going to town and doing like soup kitchen in town. And obviously it was the exciting time because I could speak closer because my English was limited. So every Wednesday we will go to town where we will share the gospel. I mean, if I were to think about what I've shared, then maybe I'll be so embarrassed, because I think I've shared whatever I got in that moment as it is without thinking about it. So that's how I kind of like get in contact with Beautiful Gate South Africa. At the time, we were just like, the idea for Toby and Aki was anyone who was involved was to really pray for the kids. No one was to try to solve their issues, was to just to be there and be a present. And then any of the kids that were willing to leave the street and go with Toby and Akia would go, and then we will take them to Muizenberg in their home. So I think that was kind of like my first involvement with Beautiful Gate. Obviously, as all good Christians do, I found a man, I got married, I left Muizenberg, I went bought a Boerewors. I was in Durbanville and doing student ministry. And then the Lord, who is gracious and crazy at the same time, brought us back to Muizenberg. And then when we were back in Muizenberg, I got involved with Beautiful Gate again in terms of there were students and missionaries that were staying in Muizenberg. Obviously, we were a vibrant church, and Wendy used to be there. We were crazy having young people. And then I got involved with Beautiful I got involved again with Beautiful Gate. By that time, Beautiful Gate was in the merge of changing, have changed from the kids on the street, have moved into the HIV space at the time, where it was a place for the kids to die with dignity. So they were given a plot of land in Philippi where it was just like at the time of South Africa, where there was no medication. Also, there was nutrition problems. But then the more things were getting better, the kids were not dying. And then the guy that I took over from, he was kind of like, you know, like when white people become like justice freaks. And then he was like, no, these children are in a closer time. That was his thinking. These kids are in a closer community and they're speaking English. What can we do? And then Beautiful Gate started one of the journeys that today we're looking at, that we have like we call it 3 pillars. So family strengthening, that really like, it's kind of like our social work services, supporting the grannies. We have 25 child and youth care workers that are working within the community, like helping with IDs and those kind of things. You can Google us. I'm sounding like the housewives of Durban. Google us. Yeah. And then we have another one.
We'll put the link in the chat as you're talking.
And then the second part is child health, which was like our original kind of like working within the HIV space and partnering with a local clinic in Lower Crossroad. And then the third pillar is education, where we have about maybe 40 young people that we work with, like about 7 primary schools, supporting kids with the after school programs. And then we've got a kind of like a new one, we call it Impilo, like the holistic. So how do we take people? We want to support families and the children and all that, but if we're not creating employment and sustainability for our families in the township, the system is going to continue. And then obviously, Minah being Minah, I was invited to go and speak at in one of their retreats at Beautiful Gate. Somehow I impressed them, while I don't think I did. And then I was invited to be a board member. So obviously, then being a board member, I was asking controversial questions that ended up like they thinking that I would be the right person leading Beautiful Gate. So yeah, so I kind of like maybe like summarizing what we do in terms of like, how do I fit in? I fit in because I am big mouth and a Jesus freak. And I was, you know, when I became a Christian, actually, I committed myself in YWAM. In YWAM, in DTS, you write your journal. I only saw my journal when I took over in 2019, that my prayer to God was, if I do become a Christian, I want God to use me back in my own community. Obviously, I was like, yo. So that's how, and then obviously the church I was involved in at the time, they were very involved in Sunday school ministry and making sure that the kids in the township, where there was a Sunday school, people were imported in the United States of St. James, Kenilworth, to the United States of Kailicha and doing the Sunday school things. And obviously there's a lot we can talk about, but I think that's kind of like my journey of faith, but also my journey of very early in my church ministry. I was really involved in Sunday school ministry and taking care of young people. And then as the 22-year-old single mom of 2 boys. So I think like my Christian faith was sort of like shaped in that. Obviously, I had too many questions, which I still have, about how we do the things that we do that we can talk about later. So that's me. I don't know if I've answered your question, Caroline.
You did. You are a master storyteller because you took us on a whole journey. And the thing that comes to mind as I listen to you is God wastes nothing. Just that feeling of weaving together your life story with the story of an organization. And gosh, you know, it must feel so frustrating to try and push that all into a few minutes, and yet you've done that for us. And I think that's just such a wonderful way for us to start, because we realized this is not just about institutions or this is work with a heart and a soul. So thank you, Minah. And now I'm going to move to Lilian, because if we do her last, then she might then have to talk for so long. She's going to need a break. So Lilian, if you can unmute yourself and be ready to share with us, your heart and soul. Who are you, and how did you come to do? What's your journey of doing this work, and
Wow.
what work are you doing now?
Okay, can you hear me, ne?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lilian, and Zweni is my surname. Currently, I'm working at the Department of Social Development. I work as a probation officer. A probation officer is a social worker that works with children who conflict with the law. So basically, I work with children who are in prison and do a lot of things with them. I'm not gonna go deep in that because I'm not wearing the department's hat. I'm wearing the pastor's wife's hat. So I'm not gonna go deep in that. But I'm also leading with my husband a church in Dunoon. Lilian started working with children at a very early age. I was a Sunday school teacher years back before I first got married. I was still a youth, but I worked with Sunday school. Those days was Sunday school, but now it's children's ministry. And then the love for children started that time, because even the church we ran was at the informal settlement. And then the children would come barefoot, the children would come without having food to church in the mornings. And then we'll first cook for them before we run this children ministry. And then we'll also make sure that they have sandwiches when they go home. And then is whereby my love starts for children and also looking deep into the lives of them. And then the moment I went to the warehouse, and then I've been employed as a social worker for Care for Kids. And I think it's whereby the love for children get deeper, because at the warehouse, although I was a social worker there, it allows me to work in a holistic approach with children, be able to go to their homes, to understand the root and the background of what is really going on in the lives of these children. So the Care for Kids program really equipped me more and more, and also helped me to, help me to go deeper, because sometimes when you work with children, we just see the child in front of you, but there is more to this child than just looking at the child. So then working at the warehouse is whereby it really opened my way and also broadened my knowledge to work with children and to listen to God's heart about children. What is God's heart for children? And there was also the programs we ran with children, like the Children Need More Than Food. I love that program so much, because that program equips you to understand the child, not just about food. Because sometimes when the child cries, we think the child needs food, but the child doesn't need food only. There's more to this child. And I've been running that program with the church, and we also be able to go to their homes and see to the parents that, okay, when the child cries, you just say, there's our bread, go home, go and play outside. But actually the child needs more from the parent. And because of the parent is so vulnerable herself with her own issues, she doesn't have time to look after the child. The only thing she'd see, the child is hungry. So that is the one of the things that really helped me when it comes to work with children. So children is really part of my heart even now. Currently, what we are doing in Dunoon, we're running a soup kitchen. The reason why we start the soup kitchen is during this COVID pandemic. When we have a church Sunday, the kids will come. They'll sit at the door. And then we realized these children are not here for the word of God. They are more for that. And then we started to cook like a meal, and the queue become longer and longer and longer. And then by doing that, one day we started during the week to cook for them, and we sat down. And we realized this child would come with 3 buckets, for the mother, for the father, and for her or him. And then we asked one of the children, why do you have 3 buckets? No, my father is scared, is ashamed to come to stand in the queue because he's a man. And my mom is ashamed to come and stand in the queue for food. But actually at home, we depend on this soup kitchen. if I can't come as a child. And you know, the sad part is that some of them were so young, they will even burn because they can't carry it. But they must come because the family depends on them to come and stand in the queue. Now there's 2 years. So, and then it's whereby the church and my husband, and lucky enough, we didn't work like we were working like most of the time at home. So I was more involved in the community, and I informed the department that I'm going to be there more informed. I'm going to help in the church. So we end up going to the homes and sit down with the families, and we realized that the unemployment or the pandemic, how did it affect the families is just worse. The problem was there, but now it is worse. And it's whereby now the church is much more busy. We're trying to, it's hard. We're trying to rebuild those families because the self-esteem is so low, the gender-based violence is so high because the father is now unable to be the provider, and now the mom is there also struggling. So what are we doing now in the noon? We're trying now to rebuild with my...
I think we were all right there in the heart of Lilian's story. What often happens with this is that we'll be talking and then she'll just come back on. I'm so aware of the sort of the threads between already Minah and Lilian's story. The rootedness in a local church, this involvement with children's ministry, with Sunday school, the connection with the children, the heart growing from a young age, and then watching how these women have been developed into just pillars of the community. And I felt quite emotional hearing Lilian speaking about what we all know to be true of the absolute devastation and challenge of the last 2 years, especially. But grateful that they are positioned and placed in the community, that they've been able to respond. So can I invite Danny, another woman with a huge heart, to introduce yourself, your journey of how you got to where you are, and a little bit about the work that you do.
Hi everyone. So my name is Danielle Moosajie, but everyone calls me Danny. So please, if you ever bump into me, just call me Danny. That's who I am. My journey to Arise has been quite a journey. When I finished school, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do, and I did have this passion and this yearning of wanting to be in the helping profession, essentially. That's all I knew what I wanted to do. So I kind of went to the States for 2 years for a gap year and kind of was like, okay, God, you tell me what to do. I don't know. Show me what you want to do. And then, I kind of met people through, because I always thought I was going to be a lawyer. That's kind of what I thought that was the route I was going to take. And then I met some incredible people who were involved in community work in the States, and I found out a bit more about social work, and so I just kind of applied back home. And then I got actually in both law and social work. And for something, it just drew me into social work. And so I remember my first year at UCT in social work, my lecturers speaking about community and meeting the needs of the community rather than you coming in with a solution. And that just sang to my heart, going, that's what I want to do. I want to hear from the people. I want to be on the ground. That kind of sparked my passion. And I just loved social work, and I loved community, I loved groups, I loved working with people. And I remember when I graduated, I applied for a job, and I got a job as a statutory social worker. So that's a social worker who does investigations of children that's been abused and neglected. And I got my job in Lavender Hill and Steenberg area, and I was so excited. I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I know my family was like, what, you going where? To Lavender Hill? I was like, no, this is so exciting. I cannot wait. And slowly but surely, as a young 20-year-old, seeing the real issues of our country and what children went through, I kind of went through a massive faith crisis. because I went into social work wanting to empower people and problem solve with people, and I just never saw the solutions. I never saw hope. And that was very heartbreaking for me, because I was like, there's always hope, and I just didn't see it, particularly when you see deep pain and hurt and darkness. It's really hard to describe around the darkness you feel when you're walking around in certain communities. And I remember crying around our welfare system, going, we working in systems that are broken. I'm removing a child and placing them in foster care, but the foster care system is broken and kids are hurt and they're angry. And I had children crying out to me going, why does no one love me? Why does no one want me? My father abuses me, my mother abuses me, my foster parents don't want me. And I just remember going, okay, that's it. I'm not going to be a Christian. God doesn't exist. And I remember my boyfriend, who's now my husband at the time, we got into a big argument because we were supposed to go away. And I was like, I can't. There are people literally in pain. And now I've got to go enjoy myself. I couldn't do the both worlds, where you're in the southern suburbs and things seems rosy, and then 5 minutes down the road you see people suffering. And that was really hard. Until he told me, you need to go wrestle with God. And so I did. And I'm like, okay, God, you put this on my heart, but I can't do this. This is just too heartbreaking. And to a point, I left that job. I went into after school programs because I'm like, yes, youth, that's great. And loved working with youth. And again, just seeing the pain. And I was working in Kailicha. And I saw the hope in the community, but I just also saw the pain and the abuse, and my heart, I think, just couldn't take it. And I actually was diagnosed with PTSD from working in the community. And I took a break and I said, maybe God's closing that door. And so I went to study again and lectured and did social policy and management. I did my master's, and I went into corporate world and did change management, working with corporates and changing structures and strategy. And I absolutely loved it, except my heart wasn't in it. And I just kept telling my husband, well, my boyfriend at the time, I was like, my heart's just not in it. I don't feel that va-va-voom, you know? And so at that time, I joined my boyfriend in a community in Heiderveld, which is just in between Bonteville, Manenberg, and Guguletu, where my husband and his family did church. And I kept going, if only we could do something where there's church and there's families and there's children, and we can bring everything together. And that kept going in my heart and my head and my prayers. And then while working there, I found about Arise, and I was like, oh, what is Arise? And met with the director at the time and just really spoke about my heart and his heart, and the two just kind of sang. And then I said, well, if you have a job, I'll come on board. And so, yeah, I came on board as a social worker. And even in the work that we were doing there, and a lot was focused on working with children in crisis, but also children without families, so adoption, and equipping parents on how to do that well, there was still such a need to change the way that we are addressing the needs of the community. And that meant not us coming in with the problem, but us looking at the problem, and going, what does the kids need? What does the families need? And that's where our psychosocial program started to get to develop with the team that we had. And we started writing that because the community wanted that, and it was led by the community, which was great. And then we just saw that being successful and really seeing impact of working not only with the child, but with the family. And exactly what Lilian said You know, it's about that attachment. It's about the relationship. And that sang to my soul, because I'm like, that's what Jesus wants, is that relationship. And that's where healing and restoration happens, is in relationship. And so when our programs then were really just focus on the relationship between the child and the caregiver, and many times caregivers and children will come and they're not even making eye contact. They don't even want to be in the same room. But after working for 6 to 7 sessions with them, they're able to look at each other and go, this is where we find ourselves and this is what we want to work towards. And that just sang into my heart. And so that's what Arise is all about. We believe that all children deserve to be in a thriving family, and that's how God created it to be. And so we work with marginalized communities, strengthening existing families, no matter how those families are formed. If it's a grandmother, an aunt, a foster parent, it's about the relationship between them and their children. And we've done that through our psychosocial programs. And then for kids without families, we want to equip parents and as well professionals. And how do we do that well? How do we get the complexities of these issues as identity, grief and loss, racial identity, as well as attachment? How do we do that well so that children thrive in those families? And then with everything that we've learned over the past 14 years, we want to equip professionals, social workers, psychologists, teachers, pastors, children's workers, on how do we strengthen families through relationship, because that is the key where we can see children thrive, and then we can see families thrive, and then we can see communities thrive. And that is our heart. And I just feel so blessed that the journey that I went through, I get to continue doing that and completely advocating that children, they do matter and God does love them, despite the darkness that sometimes we find ourselves in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Danny. I also want to thank you for being vulnerable about your faith journey, because that is actually, this is at the heart of all of us who gather together this evening, is that we're compelled by our love and compassion and by our faith, but it doesn't make it simple. And you invited us into some of that complexity and that wrestle, but that where we find God and where we find each other. So thank you for that. And so we're going to move back to Lilian now and pick up there, because Lilian, we were sitting on the edge of our seats listening to you and really feeling the story that you were telling. So I want to just invite you to, so imagining that you might get kicked out again, or that load shedding could kick you out, just to take the next, take your time and pick up on this idea of where your faith journey has spoken to your work with children and families. This idea that we're not doing this as a separate thing, that you, all three of you have really encapsulated in your stories already, but that also we have to grapple with inequality and with injustice. And our faith speaks to that. And so how has that happened for you? How does your relationship with God, the Word of God, and churches, how has that spoken to you? And then the other two questions that we will then all get a chance to answer in rotation, but you might want to move on to, is what role do you believe that churches do play and can play? What helps churches play that role? What hinders them from playing that role? And then the final thing, what hope do you hold on to, and what action do you want to call us to as the church? So that's a lot. Talk about any of that you want to for the next, I would say, 10 or so minutes. If you need to take a break and I can, ask you another question to go a bit deeper, we'll do that so that we can get your wisdom before 8 o'clock. And also tell me if you're done and you finish talking and you don't want to go through all the way, and then we'll move on to Danny and Minah as well.
Okay. I'll try to be quick because my electricity did cut and come back again.
Yeah.
So just try to I think first of all, on my personal journey, I was also one as a child helped or rescued by church as a child. When my parents separated, my grandma took me in as a very young. I think I was 8 years. And I visited a church as a child, and one of the elders of that child see a need in me. I want to say that. And then from that day, I was a beneficiary in the church, the same church I am in today. They pay. I just want to say that the role of the church can rescue a child, can build a social worker, can build a pastor's wife, can build a person who can advocate on behalf if the church is relevant. So that the church, I'm not going to mention the church, was my same church. What happened is that they see
You're welcome
person,
to Lilian.
Huh?
You're welcome to name the church.
Okay, it's the AFM Church, the Apostolic Faith Mission Church. One of the elders see a child who was in need, and that elder walk a journey with me. You know, they pay my school fees. They pay my matric fees. Today, I'm a social worker through the journey of the AFM Church. I even said to people one day when people said, the church is not there. I said, I disagree. Today, I'm a social worker because of church. Yes, my parents was busy with their own vulnerability, but the church stepped in and be the parent to me. Today, I am strong because of the people who walk a journey with me. Okay, I'm done with that part. So I just want to say to you, it's not just because I went to a church and I became a member, but they take me as family. They build a relationship with me. They see that it's not just about food, but this person needs more. And they'll be able to build a Lilian you see today. Okay.
And we are very, very grateful.
And then my love for Jesus Christ, I said that Jesus Christ is very young, and that grows so big, deep in my heart. And I even said to myself that I don't know what will have happened to me if I never met God in my life. I don't know. Because whatever I have is because through his grace, it's through his love. And because of that, there's in Psalms 83, verse 3 and 4 said that defend the weak and the fatherless, rescue the weak and the needy. And that speaks so in me that God's heart for the injustice, for the inequality, that means God's heart break for that. And that also break in my heart. You can feel the Holy Spirit breaks when you see the people that you work with. Your tears will run because it's deep in you. You feel that the Holy Spirit is not happy about it because we are all equal in the eyes of God. And when God looked at us, he saw his image because he said, we create people in our image. So when he sees us, he look at us as, wow, this is my kids. So working in the noon, I remember the time of the fire. The warehouse people will understand, will remember that time where there's so much fire in the noon. And when we walk in those parts of the fire and you smell the people, so there was a time, I don't know if Caroline remember, whereby we stood outside a shack where a child burned, cry until the child died because the mom was unable to get inside the shack because it's overcrowding. The mom doesn't have the power to get inside. Everyone was standing outside and just cry while the child cry until the child died. When I walk back, I say, God, this is not life. Because the shacks were so close to each other, you can't go in and rescue that poor child. And I remember walk back to the warehouse, and then we still sit in a circle there. We all cry because we cry because God was crying with us. The Holy Spirit was crying with us because a poor child died in an environment that not supposed a human being supposed to live there because the shack is so close. And it's not easy. Even the firefighters were there. They were unable to get in there because of the way the place is. So saying that, it is quite, seeing myself as an ambassador, seeing myself listening to God's heart every day and asking God, what do you want us to do? Or how do you want us to respond? Every day we walk in the noon with my husband. My husband is a pastor. We will just walk inside that place and pray and say, God, what are you saying? What do you want us to do? Because we can't do it in our own power. We need the power of the Holy Spirit, because you can get overwhelmed. You'll break down. But through God's grace, through the power of the Holy Spirit, you are able to stand up and walk against it. I'm going to do it. And then if you have a question.
Lilian, I remember those times well, and I even remember once you saying to me, we spoke about the burdens that pastors carry, and you said, don't call it a burden.
No.
it's our blessing, it's our calling, it's our privilege. And we've seen you and your husband carry that. I also remember, so perhaps moving into this, how this is lived out. There's your work, and I think how you must grapple with seeing children who are already becoming perpetrators themselves because of facing so much injustice, and how your heart breaks there. And I remember also a story that you told about where you chose to sit in a church. You're the pastor's wife. You can usually, most churches that I've been to, that means you sit in the front row. I would love you to share something about that, because that speaks to me about some of the practical actions that people in churches can take to see and then know how to respond.
I sat at the back at the church, and I just want to tell a story of a child. I think I shared it with Erica. There was a girl who usually come, she will come in the morning. She will sleep at the back of the church. She will do nothing. She will just sleep there. And then I'll just look at this child, and they'll take a blanket, and then I'll put a blanket on her. I won't ask why she's sleeping there. And then one day, something said, just ask her. You know what happened? That the church was actually the safe space for her, because she's been raped by her uncle every day. But she would every day run to the church and sleep at the back of the church. And then this church we created a safe space without us knowing. And then that's why I said, I'll sit at the back, because for me I didn't want to sit in the front, because I want to see what's going on. I want to see what's going on, because that vulnerable child, yeah. The church was the place for her to sleep, because she can't sleep at night. She's a woman at night, but she's a baby. She was under 10 years. But the church was the place for her to sleep. And having that blanket there, I think that blanket, get it from the warehouse. I put it just up top of her, and I will just keep quiet until I asked her auntie one day, what's going on with this child? And they said, inform the police. That child is in danger. So when I come to your question, the role of the churches, that is one of the things I'll say. The church is the place whereby we create a safe space, whereby the vulnerable, the people who have been judged, the people who feel they don't fit in, is whereby they're supposed to fit in, is whereby they're supposed to fit comfort, is whereby they can be vulnerable and to listen to and be comfort, is whereby we build the relationships that is broken, but they walk in that building. Even it's not a building, it was not a building all the time, but building the relationship that no one can break, even if that person can walk back to that abusive relationship, but the relationship that we build with that person make that person strong. And then another thing that the church can play, that I think by working in the noon, it is to educate the parents or the caregivers about the safety of children. Children need, as if you look at the Children's Act, I'm not going to go there, the children have a right for safety protection. But some parents maybe don't understand they interpret it differently. If the church can run workshops, it have time in the church, you know, for your own congregates, that you equip your church enough to stand for the rights of the children. And then the church can also liaise with the department. There's a lot of forms, a lot of information, there's a lot of programs that the department run. Like for instance, in our church, we use the Form 22. The Form 22 is a form that we use to report an incident. If maybe you've realized, okay, this child have a problem, you fill in that form, you send it to the police station. They have to take action because that's a legal document. So the church is equipped to report stuff because some people are scared to go. But if you have that document, they have to listen to you because everything is there. Né? And then I did write down some other stuff. And then also to network with your community, the role players in your community. It's important to have a community profile as a church, to understand what is going on in the community, what is going on, what other organizations are maybe working with children, who doing advocacy on behalf of children. Instead of repeating what is already there, then you guys can work together and be strong and touch the whole community and see what is there, how can you work together, and how can we make sure that the safety of children or families and their families, because that is so important. Because you can work with that child in the church, but when a child go home, you don't know what's going on there. That child might be in danger. And then liaise with government. So the limitations for that, sometimes the resources, the churches are unresourced. Some of them doesn't have finance to do that. They doesn't have maybe also even a building to do that. There's a lot of things that affect the church. And then also not being knowledgeable enough to know the knowledge around the safety of children, where to go to, and also fear. The fear, I think is a big thing in the churches, because like for me, I was also scared once when I encountered this child who's been raped every day by the uncle, who lived with the uncle. The first thing you ask yourself, what I'm going to do? If I report these people, I'm not going to be invulnerable in this community because maybe they're going to attack the church. Maybe they're going to attack me because now I'm a whistleblower. So that fear is also affecting people not to step up and stand on behalf of the children. So that's also something but if you work with stakeholders in the community, you work with the police, you work with the street committees, you work with your counselors, they know what the right people, the social workers, they will equip you and tell you this is the right channel to go, how you can be protected, but don't be quiet. So you get the information, you are knowledgeable, whatever you do, you know what is your rights, what's the child's rights, what's the church rights. I don't have any questions.
I'll just give you a moment to breathe, because yes, we call this like drinking out of a fire. I hope that people are able to take notes and take, because the kind of church you're describing is a church not just for a Sunday morning, but actually a church that uses what happens on a Sunday morning as roads into the community that they love and that they're placed into. So yeah, I thank you for those really, really practical steps. I love that you spoke about not having to do it alone. I think that's a big one. As I heard you, the churches might be small, might be low resource, but there are many others who are also in their community, and that's the hope. This is huge hope as I listen to you. I want to do something before we come to an end of your time. I actually want to ask if either Minah or Danny want to ask you a question, because often when there's a panel, I know we put things on, we welcome questions in the chat, and so please do that. But I realize that it's less of a conversation if we just finish with you now and just move on to them. And so before we will come back to you for your last closing statements if we lose you at 8 o'clock. But Danny and Minah, are there any questions that you have maybe from your perspectives for Lilian?
I don't know if I have a question. I think for me to Lilian is that I think, yeah, I admire you as a colleague who continues doing the work, and it isn't easy. And yeah, I totally agree with you that the church needs to do more, essentially, and that makes my heart happy, because when I say that as well, you know, I'm also very much involved in a church where we have a veggie garden, we do soup kitchens, we have a reading club, all of those things that meet the practical needs of our communities that we work in, as well. And I think for our listeners and for those who are at other churches, I think partnerships with wealthier churches is so important, and not just with money, but again with getting involved. You know, I think about the church that I'm in, we need more hands, we need more Sunday school teachers, we need more youth, but people are too scared to come with us. They're more than happy to give us money to take the kids out for an outing, but they're not willing to get involved in terms of connecting with the children, giving them good role models, which is vital. And then again, it's that disconnect, particularly in our city of Cape Town. I think the church can play such a vital role. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to know Lilian a little bit more. I think for me, Lilian, my only question for you is, how do you look after yourself? How do you make sure that, you know, you're saying we both know how easy it can be to be burnt out, but I suppose, how do you look after yourself? How do you know that actually now I need a rest? Because there are days you need that rest. How do you do that?
That's a very good question, and that's a question that no social worker can answer very well. I think you know.
That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm
asking. Yeah, ne? That's a tricky one. I think it's at two different levels. The first one is on a spiritual level. I pray, and I really soak myself in prayer. I have my quiet times, even if it's an hour or 2 hours a day. Sometimes I won't get a day, but maybe just an hour, be quiet in the room, and I pray and I listen to God, and then I allow the Holy Spirit to work on me. That really gives me some rest. And then in terms on the physical side, I do take, not that day, I'm not very good in that. Don't ask those questions. but I think my weekends, not all, I try my best, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not sure, but I try in between. Ne? That's enough. She's a social worker. She asked me that question purposely.
Lilian, we breathe with you tonight. We know that you're giving your time extra now, even in the evenings when you could be with your family. And so we just pray that this time could even just be breathing life into you to remind you of how precious you are and how what a gift you are to our city and to the church.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Minah, is there anything, or as yeah.
I think both of them are social workers, so I'm none. So it's I'm not a social worker. I'm just like a drama queen. But I hear Lilian. I think maybe the question that I have that I'm battling with is that it's probably easier for Lilian as a social worker to be engaged in this and as a pastor's wife. So my question is, how do we engage the churches that their pastors' wives are not social workers, are not aware of this thing? Because if you think of an African church, and many churches, we all talk about spirituality and we forget the side of these things that are happening, and the pastors are the perpetrators to our kids and families. So the engagement, you know, like the Koela, the vibe talks about, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think this conversation is a good conversation, but I think maybe the bigger question is that the engagement of the parents, you know, like we love when the kids come, but what is it that we do to engage the parents that are coming to our church? But then maybe like the likes of Lilian and the Dennis, the proper social workers, I'm just the pastor's wife who's, you know, but I think maybe that's more like my question of like really for us to really think about this engagement when we see, especially I mean, in the white churches, it's very nice. It goes Bill, and then it's great. In ours, you hear the bushes. I mean, we're mentioning names where we trust these guys with our kids. They are married. So how, maybe it's a long-term conversation for us that we need to think about people like you engaging people like us and other pastors' wives to be, because a Lilian and a Danny and any social worker, they are already aware of the tentacles of these kind of things. But at the same time, most pastors' wives are sitting at the front. Sometimes they're including their children in their homes where their husbands are also perpetrators. But at the same time, how is then the church active in the community with the awareness of these things? Because a lot of churches that are engaged in Sunday school and all these things are churches that they have a historical relationship with white churches that came and brought Sunday school. Most of our churches do not have that. And I think that's a conversation that partnership between the church, between the NGOs, between the people, and how do we really engage it? Because I think it was you, Lilian, the truth of how we treat kids in the Black community when they are 3 years old. Go outside, they are no longer children. How do we also even bring that? Because already the child is not protected. Already a child has been at 3 years old, they're assumed to be an adult who can take care of themselves. So I think there's like that bigger conversation. But I hear you, my pastor, and I hear Jesus, but you do need to rest. Learn from Danny and them. It is very important. We don't want you dead, you know, and finding ways of resting, because I think a lot of us as pastors' wives, it is easy for us to say we are so busy until you are dead. I'm not saying you will, but I'm just saying like a part of these things is learning from cross-cultural moments of going away, you know, going away without Zweni and go and rest. And I'm learning that thing for myself with the self-care, because we don't do that. We are always engaged. So I'm not giving advice, but I'm just asking us also in this bigger conversation, how do we become accountable for one another and partnering and helping each other to engage in that rest. I came for rest and then I got sick, but I knew Jesus knew that if I was not sick, I was not going to rest. So I think learning, taking those moments, but my bigger question is really like, we need the bigger conversation in the Black churches about how do we engage the children, the parents, and how do we protect the children from pastors and pastors' wives.
You know, that is so true, Minah. I remember we had a children's conference at the AFM church. And then I was one of the speakers there when we talk about the Children's Act and what the church responsibility is. And after that, few pastors' wives come and said, we don't know what to do. We really don't know, because what you're saying is so true. Some churches are really, the space is not safe. Because if that child, like the child I'm talking about now, who came to my church and sleep at the back, if the pastor was also a perpetrator, he will sin a victim that he can still use again. So really it is one of, I think it's another conversation. Or I remember the warehouse once have a retreat for pastors, whereby I think there's things that needs to organize, whereby call pastors together.
Now it's 8:02. We were not ready to say goodbye to Lilian, but I'm very grateful that we did get plenty of time with her before this happened. Just let her know that she's welcome to come back. We're going to move on to Minah and Danny, and of course she can come back to the conversation, but she mustn't stress. Yeah. Let's just take a moment to pause. I think we've already had so much to think about. Yeah, I think in the storytelling, in the sharing of perspective and advice and a call to action. And then the responses from Minah and Danny, there's been, important things surfaced. You may have questions, you may have alternative perspectives, you may want to surface something that's being missed. You're welcome to put all of that in the chat. And we'll see towards the end of our time if we can pick up some of those things. But I want to circle back, and perhaps we can start with Minah again. And this because of the nature of all of this isn't going to be the neat answering one question after the other, like we sometimes do things. So you heard how Lilian responded to things. There's the question of your own spirituality, your own relationship with God, God's word and God's church. And then the role of the church, the relationship between churches, NGOs, perhaps government services, that kind of mix of things. It would be lovely to hear, moving from your own spirituality around this into church space.
Church space is a very hurtful space, to be quite honest. I think I always say to somebody, you buy a gun for any Christian who tells you come to Jesus and your life is going to be perfect, because that's a lie. I think I have seen more hurt in the church than I have in my normal life. And again, I think we underestimate that we are sinful beings. I used to be Danny's youth leader in my previous life. That shows how old I am. So that means I am quite old. And I think I've been involved in ministry for a long time. And I think it is a good, there's something about the different churches that we come from that give us some sort of grounding. And I think it's good for us not to be married to one denomination, because I think you lose the beauty of the gospel that different Christians bring into your life. And I think I am one of those stubborn human beings. So it took time for me to come to Jesus. So when I'm not happy with him, I tell him exactly how I feel about him and shout and scream. And then obviously we get back together quickly, because, I have PhD in venting. So I think in a sense of the hurt for me that has been part of Christian faith has driven me to say there is more to the Christian faith than we have been told. In a sense that there is a formula within the Christian space where it says, in my previous churches, Jesus is God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Bible. And then that is the only thing. Then if I come from a Sangoma background, I need Jesus, the Holy Spirit, because I am actively a spiritual human being that needs to understand the supernatural part of Christian faith. And obviously, I engage a lot. So I'm an extrovert, but I do a lot of thinking. I do a lot of challenging. So I think the pain that we have gotten, I became a Christian after Mandela. So normally I tell people I'm salvation squared, because my order of salvation, I was saved by Mandela because I voted and then we were free. The following year, Jesus decided I was maybe going to kill people. He decided to save me quickly before I do damage to his world. So, and then when I came there, I've always having this questioning of what is this faith that doesn't change people's lives. And when we think of the church, so I come from a very spiritual closer home where a lot of my thinking, I'm always looking at the closer culture and how the closer culture treats children, treats women, treats what, Then you come from a South African systemic that Lilian talked about, where Black people have no value, and yet we are created in the image of God. And then we pretend when we talk about these things, people say, how long must we talk about these things until we are truly looking at each other and say, you're my sister, and therefore you and I are equal. And I will do absolutely everything to make sure that you are treated well. So these things that you, Caroline, seeing a child dying, we have a lot of land in South Africa. And people that were invited, taken the land and put people like sardines who are coming from the Eastern Cape, where the space is so huge, where children play outside. So those are the systems that when it comes to the government, the church has been quiet about it. right? So the church is saying like, oh no, but then the churches will come, like I think the pain, you know, like even with Corona, the government will say soup kitchens are the thing for Black communities and colored communities. No, they're not, because the mother does not want to be indignified and getting food from, you know, the poverty. Like my parents used to say, you don't clothe yourself with your poverty. You dress so nicely and cure those pots and you look nice. Now I must go and then get food. Now somebody, like the things that are happening between husband and wife are happening in front of the children. So that some of those things we have not thought about as a Christian community, because we have like compartments. This is my Jesus moment. This is my work moment. This is my home moment. And then if we understand the gospel, once we come to faith, there must be that integration of faith in my life, and then that transforms the way I think about Sunday school. So when Lilian was talking, you know, I did something for another organization about child well-being and thinking about, so I'm always about the Xhosa culture and African culture and racism at the same time. So I am the mushy mesh type vibe. But one of the things that I think we need to rethink as Christians is this whole thing. We see a child and separate the child from the family and not engage the child. And then we have a colonial kind of mindset where we're only looking at the child. So when you think of the child created in the image of God, that before the child was born, God knows about that child. But then when you look at the different cultures, we all know that each culture, except maybe the atheists, which most of them are white people, so we're not going to go there. But 99% of African people, we believe in some sort of like ancestors and spirituality. When it comes to Christian people, we believe in the dedication and baptism, whatever church you come from. But there is something that the parents do or believe in. And then in the Islamic culture, they whisper in the child's ear. In the Jewish culture, they do like the circumcision in the name. So there is a sense that when we do these things about church and children, we have to really think that what is the engagement that I, as Minah, who's working at Beautiful Gate, understanding when the child comes at Beautiful Gate, they are coming at Beautiful Gate as somebody who has already been formed spiritually by their parents. So in order for us to be able to understand many things, is that Ubuntu or Ilima, where we work together with people, even when we share the gospel, or even when we are saying this child comes, we only go and saying to the parents, sign the indemnity form. But have we ever have tea and say, we are the people that are helping you to look after the language that we use? So I think that the church, the state, and people, we need to say the system has been broken by our past. But God, who is faithful, so in a sense, I can't be talking like, you know, like your Dennis and the social workers. I'm talking like as a pastor's wife and the activist. So just like in case you are feeling like Minah is like, you know, talking at us. So I think those are the kind of things
we invited all three of you.
So I think for me, the understanding of how do we then, because if we know how the different cultures treat children, how the different cultures do like different things, it makes our work easier, so that we are understanding that a systems change is not going to happen only because we've changed children. A systems change is going to happen because we've changed children, we've engaged the parents, we've engaged the government. So the government makes the rules, and then we teach the Child Protection Act. And then I say to Wahabuhlali, this is my house, take your act to your school, I'm paying rent here, okay? So you can go, because I was not engaged and made aware and how I should conform and change. So even at the churches, I feel like we need to be starting to think about, if I think of Jesus, his agenda was never to really save people in the saving that we do when we meet with people. It was to love people. And loving people, it means that we need to understand people where they're coming from. And it means that we need to trust the Holy Spirit to do its work. And I always say to my kids that the gospel or the Christian faith is not, Christians are not the saviors of people. Christians are the proclaimers of the gospel, meaning that we proclaim the word of God to people and then we leave it out. And therefore, understanding the culture, the reason I'm saying understanding culture is that if you think Africa, it's called that is in 80% evangelized. How do you evangelize when people don't even understand what you're doing? We're creating rice Christians where we're saying, yes, let's have the rice. Then I will say amen. But if we don't go deeper in understanding the child and the background, even I'm talking to us as organizations, so learning new things, but also being open to say we are one in Christ. That means Wendy is coming from an English background. Somebody else is coming from an Afrikaans background. Somebody comes from an English background. Somebody's coming from what's so-called a colored community. How do we understand each other as we work with these children? Yeah. But how do we engage what the government, because the government has been put there by God, whether we believe who's in power, we trust them or not, they inform how the society and the schools are working. So how do we engage the government? And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think for me, those are the things that I'm thinking about as I am leading. Also, those are the things that I shout God at when I see a child being raped or I see kids dying and say, excuse me, you do not care, all right? You know, and I'm saying, like, how long will Black people suffer until when? But at the same time, engaging people like us who take our children into the white space and saying, what is it that I do to learn to disengage my child or learn different things so that I'm a person who's able to engage all different people as I work within the children's space. So the system of South Africa, it is difficult to engage. I feel sometimes a child who's a little bit happier or who can do better is a child who lives in the village, because there's some sort of like spacing. You know, that's the spatial justice that you as the warehouse people are talking about. If people are put like sardines, it is difficult, as I said, like most of our kids say, go outside, and then different culture says, go to your room. If it's one room, where is the child gonna go? They're not gonna go anywhere. So I think the collaboration of different understanding, but I think for us as Christian people is to look at that Psalm 139 that says God knew this child before their unformed body was formed. And then knowing that the children are a blessing from the Lord, not at the black text at the end, but they are a blessing. That means there are certain things that we need to be doing, enabling that the kids. But I think for me, how then do we as Beautiful Gate are working with churches? And I think that is the bigger question for us in the warehouse and other NGOs, that we are saying we need to work with churches, but that means it needs the likes of Lilian, who are already trusted in that space, to say open opportunities for us, not to go and tell people what to do, but to say, let us engage. So at Beautiful Gate, Vaughn, the guy that I took over from, we are beginning to work with churches. And it's not an easy thing, because there is I call it a man of God syndrome. Pastors are up there. So I went to Kenya, and I was so overwhelmed by seeing the guys from Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi, especially Black men, standing for the rights of children. And I think that is something that South Africa needs. We need African men to be the fathers that we want them to be, especially the churches. So my life is full of children that don't belong to me, because I know that my house is, whether we are on the street, they're there. Sometimes I kick them out. They said we are unkickable. I'm like, please, can you find your family? Because now me and my family are on the street. So, but I think because women will always be involved in this kind of things. So I feel like maybe a new vibe or a new thinking is that we need to be working with the male pastors and creating the space, but also for them to say, you know, like, me too, or not in my watch, for them to have that kind of thinking, because they always preach about Jesus saving people, but they never really like understand what it means, because they are not present even at home themselves. So how then they're going to be able to be good fathers and teaching what children should look like? And I think that's something that I think Brian, my husband, learned from the Western culture to be a present father. But again, when a father doesn't have enough employment that is able to provide for their family, it's difficult for them to be present because already they are pressed. So I think the collaboration between the government, between us, the NGOs, the church, but I think maybe the first people to talk to, that's my new thinking, by the way, is the men. Because those guys, when they stood, I felt something that we don't have. Like, our NGOs are full of women, which is nothing wrong. Our Sunday school are full of women. What are the men doing? How are the men going to change? Because they are very good to say, I'm the man of God, I'm the leader. Then lead in that space in terms of children. And create spaces for Sunday school for the kids. So I think those are more of like my thinking, like in looking at the book of Matthew. So me and Jesus, my relationship with him is bipolar. One day I'm happy, tomorrow I'm not happy, and we are fighting, and then we are hugging each other, and then we are dumping each other, and then we're getting back together. But by the grace of God, I'm still with him, and I'm grateful for it. So I don't know, it depends on the day. And we shout at each other, and then I'm singing my so I get blessed by the white songs, by the way. So because I became Christians with them, so that's my spiritual what. But I think the honesty when we feel like you are angry at God, and I think that's something maybe you guys did at the last Justice Conference, to learn to lament and shout and be angry at God because of the injustices, but at the same time to say, what kind of a solution will I be in this space? Yeah. Because it's good to complain. I know this, when you're a leader, everyone complains at you, but you're like, okay, can you please do something also yourself? Because if we were done doing things together, that means we're not going to change. But I think we also need to be praying for male social workers in our spaces. Anyway, that is me. I became so passionate and very like minorish. That's where I am. I don't even know if I answered your question, but anyway, if I didn't, you can ask me a question.
So, Minah, I think at this point in the evening, we're already way beyond the questions. We're deep in the waters of story, of witness, of naming, of crying out. I want to one day be present when God shouts back at you. I want to hear what God says.
He mustn't shout back at me. He's God. He must just give me my answer. That's all I want from him. He mustn't say anything to me. He must just give me what I'm asking him for.
Yeah. No, but you've named some crucial things, some hard things. As I said, there are things that people will come with different perspectives of. One thing that stands out in this for me, though, as a Christian family, we can say we are all in this together. But it concerns me when my children are more important than your children in the system. And so you've named black and white, you've named systemic injustice, and you've called out a challenge for the majority church of South Africa, but that's also not, as we know, the whole picture. We stand here together tonight to grapple with this together. So I'm immensely grateful for you answering more than the questions and for inviting us into this for now. And I'm sure we can have time I hope we can have time to circle back to it later. I want to invite Danny. You can see we've gone completely off script, which is good. So bring everything you've got for us. We want to sit at your feet for the next few moments. Thank you.
Goodness, I mean, there's a lot to reflect there with the minor-ish conversation. So, yeah, I mean, I think the role of the church is so important when it comes to advocating for our kids, particularly kids who are not seeing the opportunities and the positiveness of our system, and are being taken advantage of. And all we can do is just look at the stats, right? So past 2 years, over 750,000 children have dropped out of school. And that's the kids that we know of. How many teenage pregnancies are there? And is it a teenage pregnancy problem, or is it a rape culture problem? These are the hard questions we need to ask. And what is our responsibility? We cannot turn a blind eye to our kids falling prey to predators. And I think Minah and Lilian highlighted that, particularly when the predators are in the church, and not just being the pastors, it's youth leaders. So how are we protecting our kids from that? In terms of following policy, yes, and I have a master's in policy, but we know policy only goes so far, and so it's the implementation, right? It's the implementation of that policy and who keeps who accountable. And then, I'm just reflecting now as Minah speaks. So if I'm not answering your question, please do that. I think what also stood out for me is the patriarchy. It's the patriarchy of the church. And now I was, some of you might know, I was invited at a church to talk about it and then never again, because I did ask these hard questions, particularly when it comes to gender-based violence and it comes to our kids who are at the center of it, who is seeing that behavior happening in the home, but the church is not challenging the role of men, right? And then Minah is very right to go, it's great that there's women that are leading children's church, and that's great, but we need men there. We also need to value women, because we don't pay our children's workers as we pay the pastors. The same with community workers, the same with social workers. And I've been told, and this was even last year, that, compared to ministry, I have soft skills. I don't know what that is. And so again, this is vitally important, that the church needs to stand up. I'm at a point now where I'm like, I'm not taking, but we need to see, and the government. No, the church needs to walk with the government. We need to start being able to hold people accountable, particularly our families in the church as well. And I can really only speak for the church that I belong to currently, which is on the Cape Flats, which is in the heart of poverty and gang violence. Almost every Sunday we have people telling us, they were just shooting, and so got killed, and so got hurt, so and so's in jail. And our kids see this, and I've been involved now for over 10 years, and I'm seeing the cycle where I have a kid who is in an abusive home, who then gets on drugs by the time he's 12, to being a gang member by the time he's 15, to then by 18 already a father who's not involved because he's on drugs. And that is the cycle and the cycle over and over and over again. And he's part of my church. So what is my responsibility? What am I accountable to him while he is busy growing up? So these are the hard questions we need to ask, right? And yes, the gospel is powerful, and we need to preach it, and we need to understand that Jesus is our hope. And God loves the people that we're working with more than we do. And I think that gets me through most of the time. But we need to ask the hard questions. And really what we've done is saying as a church, going, we need to show up in the hard spaces, which means sometimes, as much as we want to be there and go, you're doing a great job, you're a great mom, actually sometimes I need to say, you need to do better. You need to be better, because this is not okay. And that's not very nice when you are a pastor's wife, which is now what I am, Minah. So I can say I'm a pastor's wife. And so it's hard when you have to hold people accountable, but you do. I mean, just last week, I got a phone call where an aunt phoned the social workers to remove her niece, who's been living with her since she was 3 years old. So what does that child do when, again, it's an abandonment after abandonment, rejection after rejection, and we say Jesus loves you? Yeah. Because Jesus' love is not practical for many of the people that we work with. And so sometimes we got to get dirty, and we need to be in the uncomfortable spaces there as well. And I think that has been very challenging for me in my Christian walk, because I grew up in a church where, southern suburbs, in a bubble, we all friends, and we go on. And then it's going, actually, there's more to this. Is actually, I need to find people and sit with people in the hard spaces to go, I'm here despite you doing this despite your choices. I love you anyway, and being there for the kids and holding people accountable to their actions, particularly the parents and the caregivers as well, and trying to break those cycles, which isn't easy. But men also have to do it, not just the women. So it's not just a woman's role to do that. So that is really important for us to keep each other accountable, and to stand up and make a difference. We can't just go, oh, that's a shame, because that's where our country is right now. We keep saying, oh, that's terrible. And then what?
Yeah.
It's not good enough to have these conversations. We need to do something. We need action. We need to work together in collaboration. We need to put our egos aside. And sometimes that means a church needs to stand with a Muslim, with a mosque, and work together for the sake of the community, for the sake of the child, and not just the ego and saving souls and putting people in seats and going, oh, look what I've done. Because it's not about us. It's about standing with. And I think we need to get that right. And that's when we form community. That's when children feel safe, rather than egos up against each other, trying to fight for bums in a seat, if I can say that. So, so I think there's a lot that we need to be challenged for and a lot to do. And I think NGOs, we have many years of experience. And one of the things I do get frustrated with, and I know my colleague in the room will tell you, is that can we stop duplicating services and strengthening those services? Can we stop going, oh, this is what we need, and then do our own thing, where there's an organization who's been doing it for 10, 20 years. They have the skills, they have the expertise. But we want to do our own thing and be the innovator and go, oh, look what we're doing. But actually, there are people in the community doing that. We need to tap into those resources and strengthen them and work together. Even though Beautiful Gate and Arise, we do family strengthening, but our family strengthening is also very different. Right? Arise looks at the clinical side in terms of attachment and the psychosocial aspect of that. And Beautiful Gate is great in terms of community and resources and the practicalities of it. And how amazing, and I know Minah and I are talking about it, but how amazing you bring that together and go, this is what we can do and serve you. And that's really what at Arise is what we vision, is to work together, so that every department, being education, health, social development, we centering the child and the child's needs, and as well as working with the entire family, because we cannot work with a child in isolation, and families are part of churches. And so churches are a big part of what we do.
Yeah, thank you for I think we use the word passion too lightly sometimes, but to feel the heartbeat of what you've just described here, to feel your passion with you, I think has been so important for this conversation. And to take it from, we can't just have these conversations, to take it into action. It's interesting for me that we moved from Lilian starting out by saying, she gets frustrated when people say the church isn't doing anything, because she knows and she sees the church located right there in the space where people are, where people are under the most pain and stress and distress. And we've also moved to a critique of the patriarchy, a critique of the systems that keep the church from actually acting in an effective way. And then I kind of like everything in between, isn't it? And so I'm really, really grateful for where this conversation has gone. I hope that those of you who are listening or who are watching the recording have been able to sort of feel like, I wish we had one of those artists that was like doing a mind map of all the ideas, practical suggestions that have come out, as well as critiques, as well as stories of hope and words of cries of lament. I feel like all of that has come out. I want to know whether I think we have, what is the time? We do want to start bringing the conversation to a close, but want to open it up and ask if there are any questions. I don't know if there have been any questions in the chat, or if there's anybody, we're a small enough group invite a wider conversation for 10 or so minutes. And then for Danny and Minah, if there's anything that you want to, as you listen to the questions, but if you want to, if there's last words that you want to bring to this group, also remembering that this will be a recording that can go to many, many others. So please unashamedly bring out, you know, a call to action that you may not have already. I know you already have said very clear things, but if there's anything else, please do think of those before we will aim at handing over to Thandi in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I do want to say, I think there are churches doing amazing work. The one thing, particularly during the pandemic, has highlighted the community local churches who are just showing up in spaces is just absolutely phenomenal. And I think when we calling to account, I think we're calling in the institution, the big institutions of church to go, okay, now what? Because we know where the power, and I think that's what we call is the power dynamics, right? So you have these big institution churches and you have the local ones, and it's always amazing to me how a church where everyone, you know, they might be unemployed, but they get, you know, they can feed 500 people in a day. And that we need to highlight and we need to commend as well. And so they are, totally agree with Lilian. There are amazing churches around our communities that showed up, and the lockdown was definitely that. I mean, you know, there's times where you go, oh my goodness, where's the world going? And when you see that, and throughout South Africa, those churches just showing up and going, we are here to serve you, despite what's going on, then yeah.
But people are tired, and where to from here? You know, and the resourcing of that local action, I think is absolutely massive. Just a word that our next On the Couch is going to be speaking about that. So about the sustainability of churches to continue doing the work in their communities. Yeah. Thank you, Danny.
I think it's also like the you know, like what Danny's saying. I mean, like, I think most of us became Christians because of these spaces, but I feel like the church needs to allow kids, especially the African church, needs to allow kids and people to think for themselves. We need to start saying to people, who are you? Ungubani, uvelaphi? Because we assume things for people, hence that we are working as if we are in a hamster. So I think like the engagement of saying like, who are you? Where do you come from? What can we do? The partnering, because I think that when we come as churches, we come, I talked about it in terms of the kids, we come as if people have nothing. People have something. How are we enabling people to fish for themselves? Because when a parent is not able to do things for themselves, or a mom, an auntie, a lot of Danny might hate me now, but Danny, I still love you, and Alexa. But there's also like these, I call it illegal adoptions that happen in Africa. How are we championing those kind of things so that people are enabled to care without the greed? Some of the things we need to think about, but also we need to be thinking that there is that transferal, that the church in the suburb can learn a thing or two in the township, but we always assuming that the suburb is the one that is got things to give. And then Jesus came among people, and I think like me and Danny are doing these things because I think a collaboration in Beautiful Gate, I call it Ilima, and it's an important thing that it's an African concept that we need to start thinking deeper, that when I'm doing something with Danny, I'm not doing it. Danny, apparently Grace is taking us to Kenya again next year, so we'll talk to her after this, but we're not there. But I think like the whole thing that you guys are doing here, so in Xhosa, they say you're sitting at the fireplace outside, right? And the men are sitting at the crow. But I think the learning and also acknowledging the churches that are doing, but I don't feel like we need to accept survivalism, because when we are doing these things, there's a survivalism. But this is where we as the NGOs, we need to start putting our heads together and saying, how do I use the skills that Danny and Alexa and Thandi and everybody that has for this community? Maybe we start one community at a time, but we need to do it well. But we have a Christian mentality that is embedded in Westernism, that I myself and I need to survive alone. We need to come back to Africa and say we, the collective we, that builds the nation. And that is something that we need to pray for. By the way, you guys need to bring a different justice conference, whatever you call it, because a like-minded people thinking about these solutions, the government is not going to help us. We're going to have to help ourselves. But our job, I feel, like Paul talks about the renewing of mind, and we are made new every day. It's meaning that we, as the people that work in the NGO circle, the power of Christ doesn't change you to go to heaven, but it also needs to change the way you think and the way you do things, and empower people to think for themselves. Even if when people come at Beautiful Gate, we're not saying this is what we're going to do. We are saying, how can we do this for the betterment of Lower Crossroad, for Heidelberg, for all these other places? So that is my prayer. But I think the collaborative actions are needed for us to do a better work in Cape Town. And we have a lot of wisdom and different minds that if we come together, we can achieve. There's I'm close. They say, the boldness, you don't wake up, it's there. They say it starts in one hair follicle, and then it goes and it goes. And then we start like that. Anyway, I must be quiet now. Look, Caroline's not going to invite me again, so I
want to receive that. I want to receive the hair follicle.
You don't want to receive the man. That's a boldness. No, not for a woman. For the men, it's a sign of wealth.
I thought you meant boldness, not boldness. Oh,
not
well,
the hair. Boldness. No, we don't. We take away that prayer. Never in the name of Jesus. We want that nice hair of yours.
Oh my goodness. Friends, I think we're gonna bring this part to an end with that, not with that prayer, but I've seen that there's been great engagement in the chat. This has been a very, very rich time. In some ways, I think I'm looking forward to listening to it again and taking some notes. I think we need to do more with this, and I'm so glad that we do have colleagues from Micah and Connect and other places here that we can continue to build this work together. Collaboration has been a strong theme that's come through. So Minah and Danny and Lilian, in your absence, just thank you from the bottom of our hearts. This has been a huge blessing and very, very rich, and I think we're all not going to be able to sleep for a few hours. So Thandi, if there's anything that's come up in the chat, you're welcome to take it from there, or finish with the conclusion to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there hasn't been questions in the chat, more just comments on what different people have said. This has just been so rich and has covered so many incredible topics, and there's so much in here that I think we all really need to sit with and learn from in our different spaces. So thank you so much. I love that we ended on the note of collaboration, because what we're doing now feels like a really beautiful moment of collaboration. So the resource Children, Church and the Law is a resource that was developed in the warehouse many years ago, and I'll just share the cover picture of it for those that haven't seen it. So this is what it looks like. It's a book that was written by Erica Greathead, I'm sure in collaboration with others, but it's a guide for churches regarding how to implement different laws that we have in South Africa around children. And I think Danny mentioned earlier, we have many excellent policies and laws in South Africa. And I think particularly our laws and policy around children are generally quite good, but it's where they are not able to be implemented that we meet all these different challenges. And so this was developed as a way to help churches in the different work that the warehouse was doing with children. Lilian mentioned Care for Kids, but in thinking about how churches could do this work of advocating for the rights of children and justice and care and flourishing of children in their spaces. And we've heard different things tonight as well of how churches themselves are often not safe spaces for the flourishing of children. And I'm so glad that we've heard different stories as far as that's concerned, like Lilian's beautiful story of how the church represented this beautiful, safe, nourishing space where she was able to grow into herself and be nourished and reach the things that she wanted to reach. But we've also heard how churches can be unsafe spaces where the pastors are complicit, or youth workers are complicit, or perpetrators even, in creating unsafe spaces. So this resource is really created to give churches the tools to be able to think about what these laws actually mean for those spaces, to do intentional work of recognizing that these are not always safe spaces, and to think about how they can do that work. And so this has come at a time where it feels like the work of Arise and what you guys are doing is really aligned to what this resource is about. And it feels like a time where that handover feels like a really productive and beautiful one. And so, so that's what we're doing tonight. And we would love to hear from you, Danny, maybe about what your heart is for this and some of the things that you are keen to do with it. And we'd love to hear whatever you have to share on that.
Thanks, Tandy. We feel, yes, there we go. Thank you so much. We feel very honored and blessed to have such an amazing resource, that we really have great plans to take it and grow it and really get it in as many hands as possible, because we want to see every child thrive in whatever environment they're in, particularly the church, where they grow, and people to equip and be advocates in their own communities, and for churches to stand up for the rights of children. So when children are dropping out of school and can't get into school, what can youth leaders can do? What can children's workers do to help navigate that? As well as, I know Minah said I might hate her, but I don't. In terms of adoption, the church has always had this narrative of what adoption means, about removing children from their home and placing them into another home, which we know is trauma. And so part of it is to advocate and change that narrative, to go, actually, we need to do the messy work, which means we need to keep families together. And that's not easy, but it's the work that we need to do, because it is the right of the child, because we know they thrive when their roots and their heritage is not ripped out of it. And obviously that we don't live in an ideal world. We do live in a sinful world. And so there are children who do need homes, but then we need to do it well. So if you're going to adopt, if you're going to go in foster care, if you're going to do safety care, you need to understand what you are doing, and that love is not enough. That love is practical. It's something that we got to show up for our kids, because when kids have gone through trauma, even if they are still with their biological family, even when they've been exposed to poverty and gang violence and gender-based violence, they're going to act out. And how do we meet them with the practical love of connection, of relationship? And we can do that within our churches. And so instead of sending the naughty children away because they're not listening in Sunday school, how do we sit with them and see that we're having a really hard time and do positive discipline and connecting with them? When we see children being neglected and abused, that we're able to blow that whistle and be able to work with our local statutory services, welfare services, all of those people to work well together. So that really is our dream and our goal. And we are very excited to start digging deep in there and being able to start advocating in the churches that we are already in partnership with, on local as well as nationally. And so, yeah, that really is what we are planning to do with Children, Church and the Law. So we just want to say thank you, and for the years of services that you've done with that. And thank you to Erica for trusting us to do this well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This is really, really exciting. And know that it comes with all the heritage of the warehouse and all of, that long line of community that keeps growing, and all that we are pushing into and have been nourishing over the years. On a practical level, for people who are either here or watching the recording, what is a way that they would be able to get hold of the resource, or is there a way that they would be able to get the training for their churches?
Yeah, so we're actually excited. We are invited to Stellenbosch University, the theological faculty, and we are going to be lecturing in Children, Church and the Law already on the 26th of April. So we're going to be there. So we're starting with that. So that's very exciting. And I love lecturing. I love students. So I can't wait to get there. And then if you're interested in our training, you're more than welcome to email us at training@arisefamily.org. And we can then also, being able to training in your own church or locally. But after July, you'll see some adverts going up around how we're going to be training and discussing and talking around why the church needs to get involved in children's rights.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much. This has been so powerful, and I think has given people many different handles to hold on to and start or continue this work in their own communities. Thank you to everyone who has joined, and for people who are watching the recording afterwards. Also just want to say, all of these different organizations, the Warehouse, Arise, Beautiful Gate, run on donations. And for all of us, I think this has been a difficult time going through COVID. I think all of us have faced different financial challenges and are still navigating those spaces. So please, if you are able to and feel that is what you need to do, please, feel free to donate to some of this incredible work that the people on this call are doing. We all very much appreciate the people who are supporting us. You've been keeping this work alive over this time, and it's a beautiful way to partner and to do that work of collaboration with what God is doing in the city, in this country, in the world. I think if there's nothing that anyone wants to add, Caroline, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Minor space, yeah. There you go. So grateful.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. We're so grateful for all the work that is going on and the hope in these difficult spaces that people are bringing. So thank you, everyone. We will see you next time. We'll send out emails for some other ways that you can get involved in our next events. Much love to everyone.